Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to episode 5 of the Neighborhood series. I am so delighted to be back here for a new neighborhood. And if you have not joined us for the previous 4 episodes, I encourage you to go back in time and go watch some of these wonderful conversations that I've had with the growers and the vintners of the Russian River Valley. We are, of course, focusing on this particular region and breaking it down into its little segments, which we'll talk about in just a second. Focusing on Sebastapol Hills today. So a cooler sort of slightly, not slightly, all the way up the south neighborhood. And just to bring you back up to speed, if you haven't caught these before, the neighborhood series is focusing on these distinct neighborhoods of Russian River Valley. You don't have to think of it as like AVAs or official designates for anything appellated. What you want to think of this as is as maybe like New York City or London broken down into its little neighborhoods. So Soho, West Village, Upper East Side, things that really distinguish these little areas, but they all have something in common. So we are breaking down Sebastopol Hills today, as I said, and I've got 2 amazing guests with me tonight to talk about this region and, of course, wines to drink alongside. Alex Kanzler of Kanzler Vineyards, welcome.
Howdy, great to be here with you, and stoked to talk about Sebastopol Hills. As always, it is the hood, and it's where I grew up, and it's where I know the vineyards the best, and it's where I'm most comfortable making wine. So just happy to discuss it and get more people educated about this whole neighborhoods initiative, because we in Russian River Valley think it's real fun.
It looks real fun, and I'm excited to find out why you call it the hood. David Gensler of Mayfi Vineyard, welcome.
Hello, what a pleasure. I'm looking forward to this.
Good. Did I say the vineyard name right?
Mayfi, my
Mayfi.
girls.
My
I have 4 daughters.
Oh, that's very sweet. My dad would like that. Well, good. Let's dive right into it then. I always like to begin with the Russian River Valley. It is, such a beloved region for Pinot Noir and Chardonnay and a whole host of other varieties. But since you guys are there and you know this region so well, I just love your thoughts on Russian River Valley as a whole, as a wine growing region, and as a place that you live. So Alex, you want to kick it off?
Sure, yeah. So Russian River Valley is really striking from a winemaking standpoint, because it is fairly big and fairly diverse as far as AVAs go. And it's got kind of a track record of doing a lot of different things well. And that's kind of our strength and our weakness. It's our strength because you can have amazing wines from a whole host of different varietals and a whole host of different styles. And that's really cool from like a one-stop shopping standpoint. But it can also be, work against us a little bit, because we're not just like Napa equals Cabernet or like Willamette Valley equals Pinot Noir.
Sure.
We make world-class Pinot Noir. That's kind of what put the AVA on the map. But there are people here super passionate about Chardonnay, and Chardonnay is still the predominant planting wise. Like if you just look at the volume or the quantity of planted acres, it's still led by Chardonnay. There's amazing Syrah, and there's amazing Zinfandel, there's amazing Sauvignon Blanc. So there's this whole kind of variety of stuff. And I'm sure one of my peers said this earlier, but like Russian River Valley has more soil types than all of France. And then with the influence of the Petaluma Gap to the south, and then some of the warmer AVAs to the north, you get this huge kind of palette of weather influences that allow us to grow, cooler climate Pinot Noir, especially down where David's place is, where like you go south of David's place of Mayfi, and it's like pasture land. You run out of, viticultural area really fast. Whereas like if you go north of our estate here at Kanzler or David's place in Mayfi, you not only are in the greater Russian River Valley, but like the Alexander Valley, Dry Creek Valley, Knights Valley, everything to the northeast is grapeland, and any more to the southwest, you run out of space for viticulture. So it's really on that marginal zone.
Yeah. It's a crazy region. And I think one that maybe gets painted as one particular thing instead of the many different things that it actually is. David, I know, you and I just had a quick conversation before this started, and I learned that you've been there for 8 years. I think spent a little time there before that, but I'd love for you to just paint a picture of Russian River and how it sort of sits in your mind.
Well, I actually grew up here. I grew up in Marin, but we had a family home up in Guerneville. So I've been coming through West County of Sonoma for 55 years. And I love this part of the world. It's got the ocean at one side and Napa Valley on the other side. It has climates that vary from very cool ocean climates to warmer inland climates with the Sonoma Valley, or the Valley of the Moon, or Alexander Valley and Dry Creek. And it has here where we sit in the Sebastopol Hills, it's kind of a dividing line between the Petaluma Gap and the warmer Santa Rosa Valley. And what you feel here is the kind of dynamic meteorology that happens when the land heats up and pulls in the fog on a daily basis. We have this diurnal fluctuation, temperature fluctuation from anywhere in the low 50s at night to 80s in the day. And that 30-degree fluctuation is something that is perfect for the vines that we grow, the Pinots and Chardonnays. It lends itself to just a wonderful lifestyle, very Mediterranean lifestyle. There's a lot of crazy kind of funky restaurants and people in West County. So I love West County, and I'm just ecstatic that I've been able to live here for the last 5 years.
Me too. And I actually, when I was back in California last week, I actually popped over to, I can't not go to Sebastopol when I live in Napa Valley. So it's a good hour drive from St. Helena. Yeah. But I always pop over there because the people are just it's the best people watching it. In fact, I was joking to a friend that as I was driving, there was a sign on a store and it was like, bees coming soon, place your order now. And I was like, I just love it here so much. But a shout out, there's a new restaurant called Kom Loy that's from the team at Ramen Gaijin. That's wonderful Thai food. If anyone is in the area, it's well worth checking out. Well, anyway,
I was happy to see that space though, because they had big shoes to fill. The previous restaurant in there, Peter Lowell's, was also like a Sebastopol institution, so it's cool.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Well, they filled them. It was fantastic. I can't wait till I can actually sit down and dine in the restaurant. It is beautiful. But you're so right, David. It is Sebastopol and Sebastopol Hills is a really unique part of Sonoma and Russian River Valley. And I'm so glad that you pointed that out. I'm going to pull up the map here so everyone can see exactly where we are. It is really far south, and I didn't fix that arrow. That's my bad. Okay. So over here, well, I can just pull it down here. Here we go. There it is. Sebastopol Hills in the blue here, that is where we're going to be focusing on tonight. So this blue area, and if you can just sort of imagine our proximity, you can also go back to the first episode to watch exactly from all the way from the world's view all the way to here, kind of where we are in the world. But over, where Eastern Hills is, that's going to be the eastern side. If you're going to go across the mountains, you're going to hit Napa. And then over here, you're going to be closer to the Pacific Ocean, which of course we'll dive into why that's important in just a second. Alex, I read some really interesting information about your parents who had purchased the Kanzler Vineyard in 1996, and they were told that it was too cold to plant Pinot Noir in the Sebastopol Hills, and you guys were kind of outliers in that way. So can you talk a little bit about that experience and maybe how it shaped the Pinot Noir going forward?
Yeah, absolutely. So my folks bought the property in 92 and started developing the vineyard in 96, as you read there. And there was not a lot of viticulture this far south. Kind of classic Russian River Valley. If Rocchioli Vineyard is a bullseye on the Pinot Noir map in Russian River Valley, then people just kind of started planting in concentric circles out from there as, stuff worked. And we were one of the, the later kind of outside of the bullseye circles because it was kind of considered to be too cool based on a lot of what David was saying, heats up inland, sucks in fog off the coast. The closer you are to the coast, the more fog and wind that you get. And, grapes do need some degree of ripening. But people got a little bit more experimental out here. I think some newer kind of viticultural technology, specifically clonal selection, stuff like vertical shoot positioning kind of lended itself to some more ripening friendly Pinot Noir. And then people were really attracted to the soil out here. We have Gold Ridge, sandy loam, basically exclusively in Sebastopol Hills. Kind of all of Sebastopol Hills and Green Valley are very, very predominant in Gold Ridge. And that's just Pinot Noir loves it. It's got a perfect soil chemistry. It drains well. It works with a number of different rootstocks, so it's just a really friendly place to grow. And yeah, so we started in 96, and it definitely gives a little bit of a cooler, kind of windier, more coastal vibe to the Pinot Noir, while still having kind of like a little bit of that Russian River classic character of still being kind of a riper New World, really voluptuous style, but with kind of coastal bend and intrigue and aromatics.
I want to pull up this other photo here of the Méfis, which is, I think, 2 miles away, David, from the Kanzler estate. And even though that's, it's, some would call that far, some would call that near. I would call that, 2 miles is not that far. My understanding is that this is a place that, even though it is only 2 miles away and still located in the Sebastapol Hills, has quite a different sort of
microclimate.
Sorry?
It's a very different microclimate.
Yeah,
here.
thank you. Yeah, continue.
Well, look, we are a little bit higher than Alex, and on a finger ridge that cuts off of the main ridge between the Petaluma Gap and the Santa Rosa Valley. And so we get a kind of 360-degree aspects differently than Alex does, which is really a single slope that he's on. So my vineyard here has one side of it which is even cooler and gets more wind and fog than the other side. We have 3 different Pinot clones on the property and 3 different rootstocks. So each block has its own characteristics between the clone, the rootstock, and the aspect. The microclimate varies significantly. It can be 5 or 10 degrees warmer on one side of the ridge than the other side of the ridge. My house sits in the middle of it, so it's kind of a circle around my home that the vineyard experiences completely different climates, just hundreds of yards away from each other.
But I assume, and we'll get into this as we taste the wines, which I want to pull up what we're drinking. I assume, despite having different microclimates, there are some through lines that you're going to find vineyard to vineyard, microclimate to microclimate. These are the 2 wines that we are going to be tasting this evening. This is the Kanzler Estate Reserve Pinot Noir and the Kanzler Méfis. And then I also just wanted to I love this picture of your family and your dogs, Alex. It was so sweet.
That's a good one. We got the dogs paying attention there. And so yeah, that's kind of left to right. My wife, Brianna, myself, my mom, Linda, my dad, Steve, and that's Huck and Finn posing for the camera there.
Cute. I love it. Yeah, you got them looking good for the camera. They look like well-trained dogs. So I love this aerial shot here. Can you just sort of take me through what we're looking at?
Yeah, let me locate myself here a little bit. So our vineyard is kind of on the top right quadrant. I can't see a cursor yet, or I could try to guide you in there. Yeah. But this is kind of looking at Pleasant Hill Road and pretty much looking due west. You see the sun coming in there. This is actually a great one to show because Sebastapol Hills really is, it's this series of undulating hills. And so you have sites that are lower, sites that are higher. You have little kind of banana belts that are warmer. And then like Kanzler, for example, the estate vineyard, and David was just talking about this, we're on a pure east-facing slope, kind of lower down on the hill and kind of protected. So I kind of consider Kanzler to be a warm site in a cool area, whereas David's kind of a cool site in a cool area, being up on that ridge top. He hits, I'll put it this way: when the fog comes in, it almost like surrounds our vineyard before it like backfills us in, and we get like this sunlight and the breeze is not as intense. And I just know that if I drove to David's house, like he's in the fog, in the wind, so developing those really thick skins, challenging the vines a little bit more. And that's Sebastapol Hills in a nutshell. So the soil is really consistent, and then the fog always fills in eventually. But when you look at the elevation and the aspect, that's what gives you kind of the different flavors and the different spices on the spice board as a winemaker. But then when we get to go in and blend, we can get some pretty good consistency.
It's so dramatic. I can't stop looking at this, and there's so much to look at. I like this vineyard shot. And then I think this is the overhead. Is this Kanzler Estate? Kanzler Vineyard?
Yeah, so that's like looking dead on overhead. So the bottom part of the vineyard where it's a little bit narrower away from the road, that's a little bit lower than the top up by the road, but it's a very pure east-facing slope, which is really great. And Pinot Noir winemakers always like to plant east facing because that's how the Côte d'Or is planted. But it makes you really friendly because if your slope is east facing and your row orientation is north south, it makes it really easy to leaf the morning side, because we like to open up on the lights on the morning side a little bit and get a little bit of exposure onto the clusters. Yeah. And then you leave the entire leaf barrier on the afternoon side to protect it from the afternoon sun. So we get that like cooler sunlight exposure in the morning and then protect it in the afternoon.
I love it. Yes, you're right. Winemakers are always trying to emulate what the Burgundians do, but we do it so much better here in California. Yeah. I think
we're way more consistent.
Exactly. I love that both of you are drinking ahead of me. I feel like that really speaks to the wines. I mean, you drink, not you drink, but you're with wine all day. I always can appreciate, when I don't have to it doesn't feel like work for someone when I'm tasting with them. So we'll do these side by side, the Mayfi and the Estate Reserve. I think given that this is David and your wine to some extent, Alex, I think we'll start with the Mayfi, just, for, so everyone knows what we're tasting, but, let's talk a little bit through this vineyard. You mentioned, David, you sit in the fog a little bit. Is this a place that you sort of struggle with ripening, and is that something that's consistent with Sebastopol Hills as a rule?
Well, as Alex mentioned, there's a real benefit to the east-facing slope, which I have an east-facing slope, a north-facing slope, and a west-facing slope. My east-facing slope is easy to ripen. It's the west-facing and to some extent the north-facing slope, oddly, that get cooler breezes and get the fog first. So that is the more challenging area to ripen. But I think what's wonderful about this vineyard is that a winemaker like Alex can pick all these blocks and then blend it the way he likes to get the kind of balanced flavor that he's looking for. And each block has its own characteristics. So it really comes, as an estate wine or as a vineyard designate, it comes with a little bit more complexity than some vineyards that have really one kind of specific aspect or even one clone that they're producing.
I think what's really interesting, and we've tasted all different not styles, but all different expressions of Pinot Noir throughout this neighborhood series, and they've all been very distinct. Even when we've tasted multiple different vineyard sites and multiple different producers within the same neighborhood, they've all had something that was sort of characteristically theirs. I'm speaking anecdotally because I actually haven't smelled the other glass, but I have to wonder, there is something of the ones that we've tasted. This is certainly the one that is the most savory, dark, most, you think of Pinot Noir as being like either, cherry or mushroom or some like combination therein. And this is the first that I feel like really leans into those great, like sort of mushroomy soil things that we love about Pinot Noir, especially from a cool site. So Alex, am I doing my job okay? Should I find another career? Do you agree with that?
I agree 100%. Again, this is Russian River Valley, and we're in the southwest corner of the AVA, but there's such a coastal lean to both of these wines, and especially the Mayfi. You can almost taste that this wine comes from kind of like a wild, sterile, kind of windswept place. Mm-hmm. It kind of reminds me a little bit more stylistically, because it borders very closely the Petaluma Gap, and even kind of the western part of the Petaluma Gap that really sees a lot of sun. And as David was saying, the back part of the vineyard not only struggles to ripen, it also struggles to set fruit at the beginning of the year, which consequently leads to really, really small yields. So even at moderate bricks, we get super intense flavors and super intense colors off this vineyard, and it gives us this very like savory kind of meaty wine. This is actually mellowed out a little bit, this 17 vintage. The 18, when I was first writing tasting notes on it, I opened up a bottle, stick my nose in and go, oh my God, it's Syrah, because it has this like briny, savory, herbal, olivey, but then it's got the floral notes in there and some blue fruits. You taste it and on
like, crap, did I bottle the wrong thing?
Yeah, on the palate, it's clearly not Syrah because it's got the Pinot kind of silky character to it. But on the nose, you're like, holy smokes, it's like got this really, savory, sometimes even saline character to it, like a green olive or something.
Yeah.
So really, really fun to work with. And when you can get color intensity and flavor intensity and moderate bricks and moderate alcohol, that's, always, that lends to the drinkability of the wine, the ageability of the wine, just can be really intriguing.
We talked a little bit last week about sort of the general sort of stereotype perception of Russian River Valley and what the world sees Russian River Valley as being. And I think, the series has really, I think, done a great job at illuminating the diversity within this region. But I think the juxtaposition of doing the wines from Santa Rosa Plains, which in some ways I think sort of characterized that archetype that we think of when we think of Russian River Valley, the juxtaposition of that with something like Sebastapol Hills and this glass here, I mean, they could not be more different. And I think I do want to sort of caveat, because I mentioned savory, truffly, mushroomy, briny, salty things, but it is all still cradled with all of that glorious California rich, ripe fruit. It's just not the first thing that, comes up in your nose, and it's not the first thing that you're tasting in the glass, which I find just so incredibly intriguing and wonderful.
Yeah, I really appreciate all those comments. I mean, I kind of feel like, we're blessed by the sun and the warmth that we get here on a consistent basis. So like getting really kind of good fruit flavors in a Pinot Noir in our area is kind of like step one to me, but that should kind of come with the territory, and it does for all of us. That's the blessing of Russian River Valley. So the challenge for me as a winemaker is how can I layer in these other flavors? And is it finding an awesome site like Macy? Is it using more whole cluster? Is it doing some extended maceration? Is it all of the above? But at the end of the day, it really comes down to site. And I just think that some of these, gems in the Sebastapol Hills, just they give us the most interesting wines. If you're interested in that kind of more like savory, spicy kind of character.
Yeah, I certainly am. And I'm excited that I have a Five Guys burger upstairs waiting for me to have with it. I just jumped to the Estate Reserve. And even though, I'm still getting the sort of mushroomy thing, I think what is standing out so much to me in both of these glasses, even more than that, is what you'd mentioned before, this sort of briny, olivey thing that's happening. And before I even taste it, that's to me one of the things that I'm finding in both these glasses. Of course, we're only dealing with a small sample size, so we're looking for things that might be consistent glass to glass. But I think immediately off the bat, even though these are from two different vineyards that by your own definition are quite different despite their proximity, there is a through line here that I'm smelling already. I don't know if you guys are as well.
Yeah, I think that comes probably from the soil and and the winemaker.
One thing that I would mention, because I'm the cork dorky technical side of things. I agree. I get a lot of similarities in the aromatics, but one thing that I should point out is there's about a 15% whole cluster inclusion in the estate, which you can always kind of draw a through line from, herbal or savory characters to whole cluster. There's 0% whole cluster in the Macy, and that's pretty consistent. I almost never do whole cluster on the Macy because it's kind of naturally just the berries and those thick skins. We get plenty of tannin and kind of phenolic and spice and intrigue just from the fruit. We're on the Kanzler wine. Again, Kanzler's a little bit warmer, can usually handle a little bit more new oak, comes in a little bit higher alcohol. It's a more kind of traditionally styled Russian River Valley wine. And so I throw a little whole cluster at that to kind of build in some intrigue. Where the Macy, this is a really pure expression of just like, let's destem the fruit, pick it when we can get it, and throw a little oak on it. But otherwise, the winemaking, like everybody who's talked to you so far, and especially in the Pinot Noir world, premium Pinot Noir, we're all pretty hands off. We all like to make the wine in the vineyard, try to get it at peak phenolic ripeness at, moderate sugars, and sort of just get out of the way. If you do the farming right, and you have the right site, it's just a pleasure to make wine.
Yeah, and I should mention, you guys actually, the Kanzler started off as growers, not as having your own wines. And this is Kanzler Vineyard is a very famous vineyard in the California community. It's gone to some of the most wonderful, prestigious wines. I think probably most famously is Costa Brown has always made a single vineyard Kanzler. vineyard cuvee. And I think it's wonderful that you guys have sort of taken it back over the past few years and started to make your own. I'm curious though, tasting through different producers that your fruit goes to, are you able to find the similarities even within those different bottlings?
Yeah, definitely. And, as those growers and we still sell fruit, so, I get to kind of see the winemakers pick calls, and I have winemakers, picking on the early side of things. I have winemakers picking on the later side of things. David and I have shared winemakers in the past, so we get to kind of see people's thought process in that way. Or, we have a side conversation like, okay, ever going to frickin' pick the grapes? But no,
Alex is actually pretty much in the middle. On my vineyard, I've got one winemaker who likes to pick at very low bricks, and one who wants to wait until it's practically fallen off the vines. And so Alex has probably been kind of squarely in the middle and picking, I think, at a really reasonable time, not not waiting too long, and not. Although I actually like the lower alcohol wines and in Pinot, and I think picking early is not a bad strategy. It's a slightly different flavor profile you get when you're picking early. But I think Alex has been, for me as a grower, somebody who's been really easy to work with. I can depend on him not screwing it up, because when you get somebody who wants to hold it forever, you're dying because you're afraid the rains are going to come and it's going to start mold problems. And it's been an interesting experience over the last 8 years, learning how to work with winemakers and not lose my shirt.
you bring
we
up
have
a
a
point.
mind meld also.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, go on.
No,
I was
go
going to
ahead.
say, David and I have a mind meld also, because I am a grower and a winemaker, so I kind of see things from his point of view as well. And I know the headaches that winemakers, including myself, can cause. And it's part of the game. If you might want to not pick your fruit on, the ideal day of 2 days earlier can be easy for logistical reasons. You might end up with a better wine just because it can be like a lower stress situation. So there's so many balls up in the air when it comes to picking. But I do just want to, before we finish here, you mentioned kind of the history of the Kanzler Vineyard, and I just want to add that, I definitely stand on the shoulders of my parents and the rest of my team, specifically my wife, who does all of our sales now. We got to sort of take this family business onto the next generation, and I just love that it's such, it's such a friendly business. There's definitely a rising tides lift all boats sort of spirit around here. And, if my dad were on this call right now, he would probably be referencing our neighbors who were like apple farmers. And when my dad showed up here and we had a decrepit apple orchard, the apple farmers told my dad to plant grapes. And they're like,
I read that story. It was a great story.
Yeah. And then even launching our winery, you mentioned the success we had at growers, which was, a blessing. And we got to be a part of that Costa Brown world in the mid-aughts, when kind of new world in California Pinot Noir was taking off like a rocket from, Santa Barbara all the way up here to Russian River, even farther north of Mendocino. That felt like that kind of 2002 to 2012, was just this, historic rise of Pinot Noir, and we got to be a part of that. But even making our own first wine, my dad and our first winemaker, Greg, picked second in our vineyard, and then it made a pretty good wine, and they bottled it and served it at my sister's wedding that was in our backyard, right out that window. And when we woke up the next morning and had a bunch of leftover beer and a bunch of leftover liquor, but all the Pinot Noir was gone, we're like, oh, okay, people like this. Maybe we can do this.
Seems like we should continue.
Yeah, so many partnerships, and it's a great industry.
Yeah, I think the thing, it's called the Neighborhood Series, and we've actually not talked about the people probably enough, because the people are really what make this place. But I love hearing stories like that. I love that the apple story, I think, is on your website, and it's a short little anecdote, but it's well worth going to read, because I think it speaks to your family and what you guys do there. I will end this with our final question, and hopefully you've watched the previous episodes, so you maybe know what's coming, which is if Sebastopol Hills were a musical instrument, either on its own or in a symphony, what would it be? David, as the maybe resident musician, can I throw it to you first?
Well, I love guitars, and I've only been playing for about 5 years, but I already have 10 guitars. So, one of the things about this part of the world and my property in particular is it's incredibly versatile. And a guitar, you can play classical music, you can play punk rock, you can play blues, you can play bluegrass, and I think that the vines here express themselves in incredibly diverse ways. So, what you're exploring is the diversity of just this one region, and even when you get into a neighborhood, the diversity in that. And I think a guitar expresses that kind of diversity, and really it's the instrument I play, so I'm going to go with guitar.
Guitar it is. All right, Alex.
Can I just like piggyback on David's answer? Because like that
you
was
can
beautiful.
if it's your answer.
I do not have a better answer than that. I can't top that. And you kind of prepared me for this question too, and I did not do enough homework there. And there's so many good like music and like wine kind of analogies, but I'm not going to try to top that.
All right, I like it. Then the answer is David's guitar collection, since it sounds like he's got so many. David, you seem like a guy that when you get into something, you really throw yourself into it.
Well, now I have mandolin, I have a ukulele, I have an electric guitar, an acoustic guitar, a classical guitar, and a few redundant guitars on top of those.
I like it. All right. Well, I think it's a perfect instrument or instruments for. I guess you're going to be a symphony of different guitars. How does that sound? You're like the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame or something. All the different guitars for Sebastapol Hills. Final notes, guys. I think these wines really showed themselves incredibly well. I think they showed terroir, they showed their place, they showed their versatility, and just how dynamic this little neighborhood can be. Any final words, remarks that you'd like to add?
I just feel blessed to be able to grow Pinot Noir, because it's pretty much all I drink now. and it goes with pretty much anything.
That's true.
I hope you have a nice
Pinot
meal
goes a
tonight
lot.
with this.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both so much for being here. I really appreciate it. The wines, again, we did the Kanzler Méfie 2017 Pinot Noir. And then the second wine was the Kanzler Estate Reserve Pinot Noir, both 2017. They are available on the Kanzler site, and I will link that below. I encourage you, if you are interested in learning more about the Neighborhood Project and about Russian River Valley in general, to visit the Russian River Valley Wine Growers. Their site is linked below. They are my sponsor and my proud partner on this endeavor. I could not be more grateful for the opportunity to get to dive into such a renowned and beloved region like Russian River Valley, and have the opportunity to talk with people like you, Alex and David.
Happy to be here.
Thank you so much. We will see you all next week for the final episode. Same time, same place, Wednesday at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. And I hope to see you for the final episode. Thank you all so much for tuning in, and I'll see you soon. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.